Hi, welcome back to an episode of the Guys Book Club in the Book Club. Yeah! And today, guys, we're an extremely special episode because today, guys, we're on episode number 375, guys. And we're getting close to the 400 special. And today, guys, to celebrate this event, we have the privilege to continue our journey with influence of psychology, persuasion, Baron B. Cialdini, page 203 to 205. Let's go. Title, Optimal Conditions. Much like the other effective weapons of influence, the scarcity principle is more effective at some times than at other times. An important practical problem, then, is to find out when scarcity works best on us. A great deal can be learned in this regard from an experiment devised by social psychologist Stefan Vorshel. The basic procedure used by Vorshel and his research team was simple. Participants in a consumer preference study were given a chocolate chip cookie from a jar and asked to taste and rate its quality. For half of the raters, the jar contained 10 cookies. For the other half, it contained just 2. As you might expect from the scarcity principle, when the cookie was one of the only 2 available, it was rated more favorably than when it was 1 of 10. The cookie in short supply was rated as more desirable to eat in the future, more attractive as a consumer item, and more costly than the identical cookie in abundant supply. And for this pattern of results provides a rather striking validation of the scarcity principle. It doesn't tell us anything we don't already know. Once again, we see that a less available item is more desired than the available. The real worth of the cookie study comes from 2 additional findings. Let's take them one at a time, as each deserves a thorough consideration. The first of those noteworthy results involved a small variation in the experiment's basic procedure. Rather than rating the cookies under conditions of constant scarcity, some participants were first given a jar of 10 cookies that was then replaced by a jar of 2 cookies. Thus, before taking a bite, certain of the participants saw their abundant supply of cookies reduced to a scarce supply. Other participants, however, knew only scarcity of supply from the outset, since the number of cookies in their jars was left at 2. In this procedure, the researchers were seeking to answer a question about types of scarcity. Do we value more those things that have recently become less available to us, or those things that have always been scarce? In the cookie experiment, the answer was plain. The drop from abundance to scarcity produced a decidedly more positive reaction to the cookies than did a constant scarcity. The idea that newly experienced scarcity is a more powerful kind appeals to situations well beyond the bounds of the cookie study. For example, social scientists have determined that such scarcity is a primary cause of political turmoil and violence. Perhaps the most prominent proponent of this argument is James C. Davis, who states that we are most likely to find revolutions where a period of improving economic and social conditions is followed by sharp reversals in those conditions. Those cities know the traditionally most downtrodden people who have come to see the deprivation as part of the natural order of things, were especially liable to revolt. Instead, revolutionaries are more likely to be those who have been given at least some taste of a better life, of a better life. When the economic and social improvements they have experienced and come to expect suddenly become less available. They desire them more than ever, and often rise up violently to secure them. Davis is gathered persuasive evidence for his novel thesis from a range of revolutions. Revolts and the internal wars, including the French, Russian, and the Egyptian revolutions, as well as just domestic uprisings as Dawes Rebellion in the 19th century Rhode Island, the American Civil War, and the Ural Black Riots of the 1960s. In each case, a time of increasing well-being preceded a tight cluster of river cells that burst into violence. The racial conflict in American cities during the mid-1960s represents a case in point that many of us can recall. At the time, it was not uncommon to hear the question, why now? It didn't seem to make sense that within the 300-year history, most of which had been spent in servitude, and much of the rest in privation, American blacks would choose the socially progressive 60s in which to revolt. Indeed, as Davis points out, the 2 decades after the start of World War II, it brought a dramatic political and economic gains to the black population. In the 1940s, the blacks faced stringent legal restrictions in such areas as housing, transportation, and education. Moreover, even with the same amount of education, the average black family earned only a bit more than half of its counterpart white family. 15 years later, much had changed. Federal legislation had struck down as unacceptable formal and informal attempts to segregate blacks in schools, public places, housing, and employment settings. Large economic advances had been made too. Black family income had risen from 56% to 80% of that of a comparably educated white family. But then, according to Davis's analysis of social conditions, this rapid progress was stymied by events that soothed the heady optimism of previous years. First, political and legal change proved substantially easier to enact than social change. Despite all the progressive legislation of the 40s and 50s, blacks perceived that most neighborhoods, jobs, and schools remained segregated. Those Washington-based victorious came to feel like defeats at home. For example, in the 4 years following the U.S. Supreme Court's 1954 decision to integrate all public schools, blacks were the targets of 530 acts of violence, direct intimidation of black children and their parents, bombings, and bombings, designed to prevent school integration. This violence generated the perception of another sort of setback in Black progress. For the first time since well before World War II, when lynchings had occurred at an average rate of 78 per year, blacks said to be concerned about the basic safety of their families. The new violence was not limited to the education issue either. Peaceful civil rights demonstrations of the time were unfortunately confronted by hostile crowds, the police. Still another type of downturn occurred. In pocketbook progress. In 1962, the income of a black family had slid back to 74% of that of a similarly educated white family. My Davis argument. The most illuminating aspect of this 74% figure is not that it represented a long-term increase in prosperity from pre-1940s levels, but that it represented a short-term decline from the fresh mid-1950s levels. In the next year came the Birmingham riots, and in staccato succession, scores of violent demonstrations building over the major upheavals of Watts, New York, and Detroit. In keeping with a distinct historical pattern of evolution, blacks in the United States were more videos where their prolonged progress was curtailed somewhat than they were before it began. Somewhat than they were before it began. This pattern offers a valuable lesson for would-be rulers. When it comes to freedoms, it is more dangerous to have given for a while than never to have given at all. The problem for a government that seeks to improve the political and economic states and economic status of a traditionally oppressed group is that, in so doing, it establishes freedoms for the group where none existed before. And should those now established freedoms become less available, there will be an especially odd variety of hell to pay. We can look too much more recent events in the former Soviet Union for evidence that this basic rule still holds. After decades of representation, Michael Gorbachev began granting the Soviet populace new liberties, privilege, and choices via the thin policies of Glasnost and perestroika, allowed by the direction their nation was taking. A small group of government, military, and KGB officials staged the coup, placing Gorbachev under house arrest and announcing on August 1991 that they had assumed the power and were moving to reinstate the old order. Most of the world imagined the Soviet people, known for their characteristic accusation to subjection, would passively yield as they had always done. Time magazine editor Lennis Moore described his own reaction similarly. At first, the group seemed to confirm the norm. The news administrated a dark shock followed immediately by the press sense of legislation. Of course, the Russians must convert with the residential cells, with their own history. Gorbachev and Glasnost were an aberration. Now we are back to fatal normality. Guys, guess what? This is the next episode. Guys, thank you very much for joining me. It's a to choose to invest with me. I can't wait to see you on Sunday for the next episode of the Gun Picking the Board. Like in the club. And we say, take also for time. Enjoy the Christmas party time. And bye-bye.